The Addams Family are the creepy, kooky, mysterious and spooky creations of cartoonist Charles Addams, who developed the characters in a series of New Yorker cartoons between the late 1930s and early 1960s. First adapted to the screen in 1964, the Addamses have lived a long and fruitful life in various adaptations, remakes and reboots. Despite various periods of obscurity, the Addams Family remains one of the most beloved franchises ever. In 2021, the Addams Family celebrate 83 years, and to help them, I will trace their evolution from 1938 to now. To do so, we will look at their entire history, touching on design and personality changes, and the various iterations over more than 7 decades of cartoons, series, and movies. In this edition of Cartoon Evolution! Charles Addams was, in his own words, one of those strange people who actually had a happy childhood, and though friends would call him a neighbourhood rascal, he was much like your average young boy, except of course for his bizarre curiosity with the macabre. Addams grew up in Westfield, New Jersey, a township which saw enormous suburbanisation throughout the 1800s. By the time he was born, the dozens of Victorian-era mansions that loomed over Westfield had become dilapidated and abandoned. Their haunting nature mesmerised Addams, who spent much of his time exploring the empty abodes as well as nearby cemeteries. Over time, Addams's love for the morbid only grew. In adulthood, he was a known collector of ancient weaponry, armour and torture devices, yet still he was more aptly defined as eccentric than sinister. He in fact found delight and humour in such things, and when he discovered a love for art at a young age, he used it as a vestibule for his curious fixations. After studying art in New York, Addams freelanced for various publications, at one point even retouching photos of corpses for True Detective magazine. In 1932, he sold his first illustration to highbrow cultural and literary magazine, The New Yorker, and by 1937 his cartoons, or as the magazine pretentiously called them, illustrated laughing squares, had become a regular fixture of its pages. While Addams's earliest work for The New Yorker was esoteric and full of intelligent laughs, it didn't take long for his darker sensibilities to creep in, infusing his cartoons with a soon-to-be trademark style of sickly twisted humour. In fact, thanks to this, many consider Addams one of the earliest and most notable innovators of black comedy in American culture. In 1939, Addams introduced one of his longest-running and most popular characters, a tall, spindly woman with pale skin, long black hair, and a dishevelled hobble dress, somewhat reminiscent of Dracula's wives. This nameless woman appeared in regular cartoons, soon established to be a witch, and the matriarch of a bizarre and gruesome family who inhabited a dank and run-down Victorian-era mansion. Though she had been depicted with a husband-like figure in her original appearance, a tall, hulking bearded man, it wasn't until 4 years later, in 1942, that he would appear in his most recognisable form, as a short, squat man with a pug-like face, designed initially as a scathing caricature of then-Governor of New York, Thomas E. Dewey. The following year, Addams expanded his family with 2 despicable children, an ugly, pudgy son and a woeful daughter, often seen playing with torture devices and plotting to murder each other. The woman's mother, an old witchy hag referred to as Granny Frump, appeared in the very first strip, while later comics introduced other extended family, such as the woman's deranged, bald, pig-eyed uncle and an almost 7-foot, clumsy, gloomy, yet loyal Frankenstein-like butler. A mysterious entity known as The Thing was also introduced in the middle 50s, but was never fully revealed in the comics, said to be too horrifying to be seen by human eyes. Though this family were ghoulish, abnormal, and horrific, it was their normality as a family just trying to get through life as conventionally as possible that made their escapades wickedly funny and strangely relatable to readers. Addams' expertly mixed mundane everyday life with the bizarre and morose, on a deeper level commentating that normal is an illusion. The anonymous author of the Yaup blog perfectly said that Addams set his comics in a world where ugly is beautiful and creepy is ordinary. Addams's strips were so recognisable that they soon found themselves a target of parody. One of the earliest and most notable were the characters of Mr. and Mrs. J. Evil Scientist, a mansion-dwelling, exotic pet-owning macabre duo who were introduced by Mike Maltese and Dan Gordon in 1959 through a series of Hanna-Barbera cartoons and comic books. Hanna-Barbera would later evolve the characters into the Gruesomes on The Flintstones. While Addams produced more than 1,300 cartoons for The New Yorker between 1932 and his death in 1988, his Wicked family only appeared in 150 of them. In fact, while these characters were regulars for a short period, none of them were given names or fleshed out personalities throughout their cartoon run, with exception of the mother and daughter who'd been given the names Morticia and Wednesday for a pair of dolls released in 1962. Addams never even gave his series an official name, with the public often referring to them as the Charles Addams characters or Addamses Family of Ghouls. However, this would all soon change when television producer David Levy came across a copy of Addams's book Homebodies in the early 1960s. Upon seeing Addams's family on the cover, he instantaneously saw a hit series and contacted Addams to discuss ideas. Agreeing to the proposal, the two began working on a treatment, with Addams's first task being to develop his undeveloped characters, drawing sketches and writing bios for them, which producers would have to follow contractually. The woman, who he described as a ruined beauty and the driving force behind the family, was, again, Morticia, a humorously feminized version of Mortician, and well-known actress Carolyn Jones was cast to portray her. Her husband, a crafty schemer but also a jolly man in his own way, was named Gomez by his actor John Aston, after the network fought back against Addams's original name, Rapelli, assumedly believing a character named after the word repellent wouldn't be attractive to audiences. The daughter, a solemn child, played by the young Lisa Loring, was given the name Wednesday, after a 19th century nursery rhyme which included the phrase, "Wednesday's child is full of woe," while the son, an enigmatic monster of a boy and a dedicated troublemaker played by Ken Weatherwax, was named Pugsley, after the network again fought against Addams's preferred name, Pubert, finding it inappropriate for television. Furthermore, Morticia's incorrigible uncle, portrayed by comedian Jackie Coogan, was named Uncle Fester, after the word meaning to rot. The shambling yet faithful, towering mute of a butler, played by Ted Cassidy, became Lurch, after his lurching movements, and Granny Frump, played by vaudeville actress Blossom Rock, was renamed Grandmama, after the network became worried she'd be confused with Granny from popular sitcom The Beverly Hillbillies. The family's enigmatic pet monster, The Thing, now just Thing, was made a sentient, disembodied hand inside a box, despite Addams's initial wish for it to be a disembodied head that could roll around the family's gothic mansion. Another family member, Cousin It, a dwarf covered in hair, was also introduced, becoming the only character not created by Addams. Altogether, they were christened with the family name Addams, and naturally became
The Addams Family.
Debuting in 1964, the series was created as a family sitcom, much like Father Knows Best, My Three Sons, or The Dick Van Dyke Show, but in the words of Levy, with different people. In the transition from strip to screen, the characters were made to be wacky and zany rather than wicked and frightening. In Addams's words, they were now only half as evil. That said, the characters, seemingly vile on the outside, were made incredibly kind and loving on the inside. They were a family that cared deeply for one another and treated others with respect. Though they loved to relish in misery, they were incredibly happy for it. Meanwhile, Morticia and Gomez's steamy romance was often considered the first sexually charged marriage in TV history. While the cartoons had utilised a sophisticated dark humour, the series was more lowbrow and gag-centric, in line with series like My Favourite Martian, I Dream of Jeannie and Bewitched. As a result, this iteration also saw the characters humanised, with Levy remarking, "They're not monsters or ghouls, they're simply a rather peculiar family in the neighbourhood." Much of the series' comedy even came from the culture clash between the Addams and other locals, with the Addams depicted as normal and the regular folks as the outsiders. Overall, in a socially and racially charged era, the Addams family dared to champion equality and encourage people to not judge by appearances. According to Stephen Cox, author of the Addams Family Chronicles, these adult themes gave the series an unusual intellectual charge. Despite all of these changes, Cox notes that the Addams family still captured the flavour of Addams's cartoons, saying the route creators took was just the right approach. Regardless, Addams reportedly wasn't very fond of the show when the changes made. Biographer Linda H. Davis claimed he didn't even really watch it. Addams was allegedly even more resentful, as the New Yorker refused to run Addams Family cartoons after the show's premiere. Supposedly, Addams remained bitter towards the series and the New Yorker until the end. The Addams Family ran on ABC for 2 seasons between September 1964 and April 1966, and at that time was only a moderate success, with the similarly themed The Munsters outperforming it in the ratings, though many consider The Munsters a rip-off of The Addams, given that they both debuted and coincidentally enough were both cancelled within weeks of each other. It's likely the series were in production so closely that each network probably didn't even know the other existed prior to their premieres. One story, however, suggests that ABC greenlit the Addams Family specifically because they did in fact know CBS was creating The Munsters. Other than middling ratings, it's also suggested that television's rapid switch to mostly colour production in 1965 was the final nail in the Addams' coffin. Today, the Addams Family lives on as a cult classic, with perhaps its snappy theme song by Vic Mizzy its most defining factor. The next time the Addamses appeared on TV screens was in a 1972 episode of Hanna-Barbera's New Scooby-Doo Movies, a series which saw Scoob and the gang solving crimes alongside real-life celebrities and fictional characters. In the episode, the gang's van breaks down near the Addams mansion, and they are drawn into a web of intrigue when Wednesday is kidnapped. For this iteration of the characters, their first official foray into animation, the family were drawn to resemble the character models of Addams's original comics, yet their portrayals and personalities matched up with the television series. John Astin, Carolyn Jones, Jackie Coogan and Ted Cassidy returned to voice their respective characters, while 11-year-old Jodie Foster voiced Pugsley, actress Cindy Henderson voiced Wednesday, and legendary vocal performer Janet Waldo voiced Grandmama. The episode incorporated various other elements from the live-action series, including Thing's depiction as a disembodied hand, Gomez and Morticia's passionate romance, and appearances by Cousin It and Morticia's carnivorous plant, Cleopatra. Due to enormous demand following the episode, Hanna-Barbera debuted the Addams Family animated series in September of 1973. While the characters appeared in the same designs, the series took the characters into new territory, following their hilarious misadventures as they embarked on a cross-country road trip in their creepy camper RV, designed after their mansion. It was the first piece of Addams media to properly take the family out of the home, and the first to depict Uncle Fester as Gomez's brother, a piece of lore which has remained ever since. Coogan and Cassidy continued with their roles, while Foster, Henderson and Waldo returned from Scooby-Doo. However, Astin and Jones were replaced by Lenny Weinrib and Waldo. The series was only mildly popular, lasting a single season of 16 episodes, one of Hanna-Barbera's shortest. In 1975, however, Gold Key Comics published a 3-issue series which adapted various episodes. Outside of various advertisements, this was the first time they'd appeared in print since The New Yorker. They were also the first Addams comics to be printed in colour, and the first without the authorship of Addams himself. With the re-emergence of Addams' popularity, 1973 also saw ABC produce a pilot for a potential live-action variety show, The Addams Family Funhouse. The series was set to feature musical numbers, dance party sequences, and comedic skits, similar to the popular Laugh-In. With the concept not ordered for series, the pilot instead aired as a TV special. Airing only once, all that remains today is this single publicity image. As is clear, the entire cast was changed, with Jack Riley as Gomez, Liz Torres as Morticia, Stubby K as Fester, Pat McCormack as Lurch, and Noelle Von Son as Wednesday. Notably, Pugsley was played by Butch Patrick, who'd portrayed Eddie Munster in The Munsters. 4 years later, most of the original cast reunited for tele-movie Halloween with the New Addams Family, a direct follow-up to the original series, which saw Gomez's brother come to stay while the family prepare for Halloween festivities. The only core cast member that didn't return was the then ill Blossom Rock, with Jane Rose instead taking the role of Grandmama. The special is the only of the original Addams Family installments to be filmed in colour, and was far more over the top and, well, 70s in style, missing the mark of what made the original series so understated and special to begin with. Originally intended as a pilot for a series revival, the network passed on any further installments. Sadly, the franchise remained dormant for almost 20 years and fell into relative obscurity. Due to this, and with Addams's passing in 1988 making rights issues complicated, various projects failed to eventuate. After a long battle, however, Paramount managed to get a large-budget theatrical feature film off the ground in 1991, directed by first-time director Barry Sonnenfeld. The Addams Family was a modern reinvention of the original series, borrowing all the, by now, iconic elements that had become so inherent to the franchise, though also aimed to be far more faithful to the New Yorker cartoons. The result was a sickly twisted, tongue-in-cheek black comedy, which featured a broad stroke of macabre humour, clever satire, and a roster of screwy yet entirely sinister characters. Though a family film, filmmakers could get away with far more gruesome themes and visuals, as well as more adult undertones than the 60s series. Taking the lead roles were Angelica Houston, Raul Julia, Christina Ricci, Jimmy Workman, Carl Strucken, Judith Malina, and Christopher Lloyd. The most notable element that the film introduced to the Addams Family lore was Wednesday's entirely morose personality and inability to smile. Additionally, thanks to advancements in special effects, Thing was now able to leave his box as an entirely dismembered, sentient hand. The movie was, surprisingly, one of the year's biggest, making almost $200 million at the global box office on a $30 million budget. Naturally, a second, Addams Family Values, quickly followed in 1993. The entire cast returned for the sequel except Melina, who was replaced by Carol Kane. A third Addams child named Pubert was also introduced, a name finally suitable enough for the screen. Commonly considered the better of the two, Values managed to be even darker, yet also more hilarious and entertaining, offering one of the greatest examples of black comedy satire ever put to film. Unfortunately, it fell far short of the first at the box office, and all hopes for a third were quickly dashed. Regardless, the film introduced new audiences to the Addamses and reignited a love with older viewers. They live on as arguably the most beloved versions ever. The success of the first movie also inspired ABC to commission a brand new animated series from Hanna-Barbera, who produced 21 episodes across 2 seasons between 1992 and 1993. This revival was brighter, less macabre, and more kid-friendly than the original animation, and while the characters were returned to their home, they now faced crazy hijinks and outlandish villains in their jovial town of Happydale Heights. While reminiscent of the original series, and Addamses comics, brand new character models were created, giving them a livelier, modern spin. John Astin again reprised Gomez, while a roster of voice artists and comedians took on the others, most notably Rip Taylor as Uncle Fester, Carol Channing as Grandmama, now renamed Granny Frump, and Jim Cummings as Lurch. Despite the show's lighter nature, Wednesday's morose personality was carried over from the films. In 1998, another live-action film, Addams Family Reunion, was released direct-to-video by Warner Brothers, which they co-produced with new rights holders Saban Entertainment. Unconnected to the Sonnenfeld movies, Reunion was created as a 90-minute pilot for a proposed series. However, Saban instead repurposed it as a direct-to-video feature when producers rightly realised it wasn't very good. Struken returned to his role, while the rest of the cast were replaced by the likes of Tim Curry, Daryl Hannah, Jerry Messing, Nicole Fuger, Alice Ghostly, and Patrick Thomas. One would be forgiven if they thought that Reunion was actually a sequel to the Sonnenfeld films, because despite being heavily geared towards younger children with almost no dark or adult humour, it's quite clear that this was an attempted imitation. In fact, producers initially approached Houston and Lloyd to reprise their roles, though both declined out of respect for Raul Julia, who had passed away in 1994. Additionally, it was never made explicitly clear in marketing that it wasn't a sequel, and Struken's recasting likely didn't help confusion. Naturally, Reunion was met with poor reception and has essentially been buried with time, having never been released on any home media format since the original VHS. Though the planned Reunion series was scrapped, in 1998, Saban and the Canadian Shavig Entertainment produced a separate new Addams Family sitcom, aptly titled The New Addams Family. A contemporary remake of the original, it featured similar character portrayals and repurposed numerous storylines with edgier jokes and a modern edge. It also borrowed elements from the live-action movies, including the morose depictions of the children and the entirely disembodied Thing. Aside from Fugia returning from Reunion, an entirely new cast was introduced, including Glenn Taranto, Ali Harvey, Brody Smith, John DeSantis, Michael Roberts, and Betty Phillips. Additionally, John Astin appeared in a recurring role as Gomez's father, Grandpapa Addams. The series was well received, but only lasted a single season of 65 episodes, one more than the original. In 2007, the first ever stage production based on the property began development. At the request of the Addams Foundation, it was solely based on the original comics, with no influence from the prior adaptations. However, one major deviation saw Wednesday and Pugsley aged up to 18 and 11 years old respectively. The musical comedy, with lyrics by Big Fish's Andrew Lipper and book by Jersey Boys' Marshall Brickman and Rick Ellis, opened on Broadway in March 2010. Initially, the show starred Nathan Lane and BB Newith, though Roger Rees and Brooke Shields eventually took over the roles. Despite early poor critical reception, it was well received by audiences and nominated for 2 Tony Awards. It ran for 757 performances, including previews, until late 2011, before travelling for 2 US tours, an Asian tour and a UK tour until 2017. In 2019, the Addamses returned to animation, with MGM and Bron Creative's The Addams Family animated film. Again, this version borrowed elements from both the original series and the 90s films, while taking the lighter, family-friendly tone of the Hanna-Barbera series. This iteration featured the most star-studded lineup ever, including Charlize Theron, Oscar Isaac, Chloe Grace Moretz, Finn Wolfhard, Nick Kroll, Snoop Dogg, Bette Midler, and the film's co-director Conrad Vernon as Lurch. The film made over $200 million worldwide on a $24 million budget, and naturally spawned a sequel, The Addams Family 2, released in 2021. This follow-up took inspiration from the original animated series, and saw the family out on a wacky road trip journey of self-discovery in their mansion-inspired camper. Most of the cast remained the same for this outing, except for Javon Walton replacing Wolfhard. Met with a mostly negative reception, particularly for its unusually saccharine style, and released during the worldwide pandemic, the film only took in $75 million globally. While it's probably unlikely a third animated feature will be produced, another exciting Addams production is currently in the works, an 8-part live-action series from stylish, macabre filmmaker Tim Burton, titled Wednesday. Burton has previously been attached to Addams Productions. He was approached to direct the first live-action movie, but passed in favour of Batman Returns, and in 2010 was developing an ultimately cancelled stop-motion animated film for Illumination Entertainment. Wednesday will star Jenna Ortega in the title role, Louis Guzman as Gomez, and Catherine Zeta-Jones as Morticia. Described as a sleuthing, supernaturally infused mystery, the series will focus on Wednesday's attempts to master her emerging psychic ability, thwart a monstrous killing spree that has terrorized the local town, and solve the supernatural mystery that embroiled her parents 25 years ago, all while navigating her new and very tangled relationships of the strange and diverse student body. At the time of this video's release, the series is in production and set for release on Netflix sometime between 2022 and 2023. Unlike most of the franchises covered in this series, it's interesting to see the Addams Family, which has spent much of its life an obscure hidden gem, flourishing in the modern age, refusing to die a slow and painful death, perhaps the way the Addams Family would have preferred it. And at that, it's over to you. I want to know, what's your favourite iteration of the Addams Family? Fire away down in the comments below and let me know your thoughts. Hey everyone, if you haven't yet, smash that big old subscribe button up on your screen to keep up to date with all my content, and hit that like button down below. Also, don't forget to check me out on social media, and please consider supporting me over on Patreon for as little as $1 a month for exclusive videos, early access content, and to get your name up on the screen. Thanks again for watching.